So onto the topic of client trends, and one interesting thing obviously appears to be that as clients are becoming more sophisticated, so too do their needs. But I got just one simple question, which is probably going to have a complex range of answers. What for you, Siraz, I'll start with you, is the biggest trend impacting your Asia Pacific clients, would you say?
Again, based on what we highlighted and the setting the scene, I will say just to help to have a kind of holistic picture of where we are, what is happening, therefore, what do we observe from clients? Two aspects. Number one, as I was highlighting, private capital, definitely a clear shift in terms of asset allocation and weightage, hence more value that they expect from the assets release. The second, which is probably correlated to that, it's a requirement for data solution. Why? Again, multi-asset class, multi-investment horizon, multi-jurisdiction, multi-provider, multi-asset manager. So basically what they are looking at in terms of how can you help me to extract more value from the data? How can I get insight, be it in terms of performance or risk that I take? And more importantly, how this can help me either to measure, as I was highlighting, the performance, or help me to take the right decision. And lastly, I will say it's everything around, am I going in the right direction, specifically for the one who have put sustainability at the top of the agenda. So clearly what they are looking, it's data aggregator, making sure that we have the right solution, scalable, industrialized, that help them to pick up the information that they need for their own purpose. Mm-hmm. This is definitely one of the key, I will say, behavior and direction that we see.
You mentioned sustainability.
Yes,
ESG
indeed.
Still a big theme here.
It is. Again, we can hear different sound coming from different part of the world. Again, without taking any specific position. You take Australia, it's a clear target. Mm-hmm. It's a clear target. How can I make sure that what I'm doing, it's for the future? It's for the good of the society. It's for the good of my employee. It's of the good of my shareholders. So definitely, I will say sustainability remain one of the key, I will say, agenda items and priorities for our clients.
Thanks. Francois, don't feel like you have to keep to one trend, but what does stand out for you?
Look, I think everything that you touched around data is absolutely right and resonates. And this, to me, comes back to what are we doing as an asset servicer? What is our role? Clearly, there's the core custody side, but to Phil's point earlier, it's much more than that. And one of that is getting the data, timely accuracy, insights, consolidation. I love the way you put it, Siraz, around multi-provider, multi-assets, multi-everything, and therefore the need to consolidate. So certainly data is a key piece there. Look, cost pressures is still a real challenge for everyone. When we think about the current environment for asset managers and insurers, where interest rates are still relatively high, where markets are somewhat volatile, but actually the performance haven't been fantastic. Therefore, I can go and keep my cash and have a 4% return in a cash deposit. Makes it very challenging for asset managers and insurers, and therefore the cost side of the equation is something that needs to be dealt with. They manage very closely. The other piece, and we touched on it earlier, is new revenue streams. So expanding the universe, and we touched on the retail participation. Right? High net worths, look, there's a huge amount of value, we know that. But increasing retail participation can only happen if costs go down. And that means driving technology or leveraging technology to drive those costs down. Yeah. So I've danced a little bit around it, but look, technology, data, retail participation.
Definitely hold that thought on tech. I'll come to it next, because that is interesting in the context.
But before we forget that, at the end, again, we are a custodian of the client's assets. before we go to value proposition, added value solution, additional revenue, let's not forget the basics of our role, safeguarding the client assets. In the current environment, if you cannot guarantee that you have the right process, you are automated well enough, you can provide to me the assurance that my assets will be well safeguarded with you, this is again the starting point.
Yep.
And that's critical, and we should not forget that.
But this is why I love these kinds of conversations, right? Because we're all talking about data, technology, and we all understand it, but there's also, kind of the root behind that, right? You talked about asset classes and the challenges there. But one other thing that's happening is settlement compression has a massive impact on every participant in our ecosystem. And I'll give you an example, right? The Americas move, right? Just from an Asia impact, while we put a lot of automation, people try to help clients, et cetera, the Asia-based clients still had roughly 20% of their workforce increased working after hours, 20%, right? And then maybe 16%, I need to confirm, 16% during the week, but then the weekend was like a 20% increase. And I'm talking about non-operating, normal operating hours, an increase just in FTE resource to accommodate a change that's going on in the Americas, right? UK and Europe is next. Think of the time zone difference. I mean, we're 12 hours in Asia, so you can put a couple of people working a couple extra hours or bring them in early in the morning. Europe and UK is going to be 2 a.m. It's not feasible to throw bodies, so you're going to have to leverage technology and these things that are impacting. That then comes down over to your cost equation about how do you manage costs. We as service providers need to be able to provide data in a seamless manner that can be absorbed by our clients, that can then frictionlessly move throughout their environment so they can make both investment, settlement, middle office decisions, counterparty decisions, right? We start as an industry need to start looking at things like single event processing in order to go, each step throughout that chain is sequential with different data points that different intervals may not be absorbing. This is where technology can play a key role because now theoretically we can, well, not theoretically, like reality is we could all be connecting, leveraging those technologies and extrapolating the real-time data that we need in order to, not just for ourselves, but our clients, right? And then if we're all as an industry better for it, and a lot of this settlement compression is forcing the move to automation that otherwise, we probably could go another couple of years without that big transition.
No, you're right. I believe that beside being the custodian of client assets, we are the custodian of data. And if I may take an analogy, let's consider the data being the hidden gems. Honestly, I believe that it has not been exploited. We didn't extract it yet, the full potential. And again, like the gems, you need to polish it, you need to structure it, you need to expose it, you need to distribute it to basically extract the value. And today I believe that as an industry, I believe that there is a lot of room for improvement, and I'm sure that there is a lot of initiative going around, but clearly this is the backbone. Yeah. And I believe that from that data, we can address a number of challenges because at the end, client want, again, back to basics, clean information, the quickest possible to help me either manage my risk, either to take the right decision. And today there is a lot to be done.
I'm interested, do you see us being able to charge for that?
That's a very good question. As long as your data is clean, of course, monetization can come in the picture. I believe so. Probably by combination of multiple data. The one that we have in our own organization, but imagine tomorrow you can integrate data coming from third-party vendors, data coming eventually as a vision from social media. Why a certain stock suddenly go up and down? Maybe there is some news that is not financial information. So again, it's structured data, unstructured data, financial data, non-financial information. At one point, if you manage to aggregate all that and have the right solution to extract that such kind of insight, this may go probably as a next level.
Yeah. I mean, so from my, and I agree with you on that. My perspective, though, is just, I'll tweak it a little bit, and I'll say this. I think you can commercialize data from our perspective, from banks and custodians' perspective. We can commercialize that data, but it'll be commercialized into what is the value add that we are now providing to our clients versus a line item charge. I think there's enough data providers, and yes, we could resell certain levels of data, but I think ultimately the difference maker as we go forward into that industry is how well you're able to enrich the data sets that you have in order to then apply that to new products and services, because that's an indirect commercialization versus an outright sale. Because I think when you start thinking about outright sale, you get into a question is, can you resell me my data, right? And that's something that needs to be addressed as this. But what I really love about where we're at on data is that most people in our industry now understand what we're talking about when we're having conferences and discussing data. Whereas 5 years ago, it was only the data people in the room, and it was the penny drops when you're like, we need clean data throughout the environment, right? Once you can get there, then you can get to a utopian place where you can value add with that data. And then we haven't even talked about data into AI and then how AI is going to, but that's what I mean. This is the exciting change that's afoot within our industry. I think it's fantastic.
Quick question. Is there demand from the clients for digital assets in this region? I know Standard Chartered have been setting up various hubs, and we can talk about tokenization, but I'm talking about cryptocurrencies and trading and custody from providers like yourselves.
So the direct answer is absolutely.
Yeah.
And look, so we've set up across the Middle East, in Luxembourg, in Hong Kong, and we'll be launching soon in Singapore for Standard Chartered. The demand for crypto is there. There's a demand for having an institutional grade custody with a balance sheet behind it to be able to support a new asset class. And that's what we're seeing, and hence why we're launching it out.
Yeah.
To me, this is a platform of which there's the larger piece, which is the tokenization. And that's the intention. And as you've said, and as you published around the China AMC money market retail tokenized fund, that's an example of a huge asset manager saying, actually, I no longer proof of concept, we need to go live, we need to push this ahead. And at the same time, I remember in 2017 doing a strategy piece around DLT and how it was going to transform. And there's many elements where I feel we actually haven't moved forward that much. Now, the big difference in 2025 is that there are real commercial opportunities and money is being printed and therefore enabling us to drive that.
No, compare, and it's interesting because, again, as we started a few years ago, we thought that it will completely revolutionize the industry. Is that still a hype, or do we believe that this could have picked up faster? Clearly, talking to our client and what we hear from our side, still willingness to invest into tokenized assets, but real-world assets. So really, again, backed up, recognized as security from a regulatory standpoint. So today, all I will say, the experiment and the use case that we have seen, it's mainly on mutual fund. You're absolutely right, because of the transparency, because of the speed, because of that decentralized, I will say, way of reaching out to transfer agent and an investor. Mutual fund, definitely. And the second kind of, I will say, trend that we observe, it's around bonds. So really the issuance of bonds through the DLT and all the mechanism in terms of distribution of the coupon, et cetera, et cetera. So these are more, or at least from our perspective, focusing on the real world assets.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, look, you've seen on the bond space, we've worked with Euroclear, we've issued digital bonds. Where I see us, and what to me is the next phase is, we're not talking about proof of concept. Everybody knows what a digital asset is. Everybody understands the technology. And we're going to see we're likely to see regulatory change that's been holding a lot of the US banks and European banks back to a degree. But the evolution of the discussion now is talking about what does the ecosystem look like, right? And what do I mean by that is, well, it's one thing to create a digital asset, but that now needs to be able to be tradable. It needs to be able to be mobile. You still need venues to be able to, whether that's a virtual venue, et cetera. But the question is okay, how am I going to connect there? Am I going to do all that build myself? Am I going to manage wallets for clients? Or are my clients going to connect directly? And then more importantly, how do I do KYC and due diligence on these venues, right? I mean, if 100 new places pop up overnight, where's the liquidity going to be? And how are you going to be, and it goes back into what we traditionally provide, asset safety, trust. How do you get that in an industry when you don't know how to validate what their management doing, what their finance teams are doing, what's the soundness of their infrastructure? Right? We're blinded by the technology. We now need to look at, well, what is the next phase? Licensing, due diligence, access channel, and then build that ecosystem, because the technology is going to just continue to improve and people are going to leverage that technology because of the value that it brings. I think that's interesting because that's where the discussion is. It's no longer, well, people want that asset, whether it's crypto, whether it's funds, ETFs, the investment community is there. Now we need to build the ecosystem to support that investment.
All right, clearly to unlock that potential, the challenge that we have observed for the last couple of years still remain. Regulatory uncertainty.
Yeah.
What about the legal framework around that? Yeah. How do you operate eventually traditional system infrastructure versus all these new platform that is coming? Interoperability. So these are, again, because at the end we are a scale business, and we are safekeeping assets. So basically, these three element dimension that needs to be solved, have a clear direction to make sure that again we are clients. Number one, feel more comfortable and have increased appetite on that. But at the same time, it's to making sure that from an end-to-end process perspective, this is solid. And guaranteeing basically that the assets remain and the ownership is verified.